still unwed. The ex mocked. Unaware, a poor Omega married the most powerful Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Emily Carter. Emily Carter stood near the edge of the community hall where the lights were warm but never quite reached her, the kind of glow that made polished shoes shine and left plain ones unnoticed. She wore a simple dress, soft gray, nothing flashy, nothing that invited questions, and she held her shoulders the way she always had, straight, quiet, practiced. This was a gathering meant for reconnecting, for showing progress, for subtle comparisons disguised as smiles. And Emily knew that the room remembered her differently than she remembered herself. Years ago, she had been the poor Omega with a borrowed coat and a future everyone assumed would stay small. Tonight, she was just another familiar face returning home. The air carried laughter and the low hum of conversations about promotions, engagements, and new beginnings, and Emily listened without inserting herself, the way she had learned to do. Then she heard her name, light and careless, spoken by a voice she recognized before she turned. Ryan Mitchell stood with his arm comfortably linked to someone new, confidence fitting him like a tailored jacket. His smile widened when he saw her, not unkind, just curious in the way people get when they believe they already know the answer. "Emily," he said, eyes flicking briefly to her empty left hand. "Still unwed?" The question landed softly, publicly, and a few nearby conversations slowed just enough to hear. Emily felt the familiar pause inside her chest. Not pain, not anger, just the quiet space where old expectations used to live. She thought of the years between then and now, the mornings that began before sunrise, the long roads she had taken without explaining herself to anyone, the choices she made when no one was watching. She met Ryan's gaze and offered a polite smile that revealed nothing. "I'm doing well," she said, and meant it. The room seemed to move on, the moment dismissed as harmless small talk, but Emily remained still, grounded, aware of the subtle things others missed, the way a few scents shifted, the way the atmosphere tightened for a heartbeat and then released. She adjusted the bracelet at her wrist, a modest piece she never took off, and her thoughts drifted not to the past but to a promise made far away, in a place where titles carried weight and silence meant safety. She had learned that not every truth needed defending, that some answers arrived on their own time. As the evening continued, Emily listened, observed, and waited, not with nerves, but with calm certainty, knowing that the story everyone thought they understood had already changed, even if they didn't see it yet. Emily moved through the rest of the hall with a measured ease that surprised even her, pausing when spoken to, answering kindly, never volunteering more than necessary. The question Ryan had asked lingered in the air longer than the sound of his voice, echoing in sideways glances and polite curiosity, but no one pressed her, not yet. She accepted a glass of sparkling water, the condensation cool against her fingers, and listened as someone nearby talked about a recent move across 3 states, about long drives measured in hundreds of miles and the comfort of familiar highways. Emily nodded, present but distant, her thoughts anchored somewhere steadier. She noticed Ryan again across the room, animated, confident, performing the version of success everyone expected from him, and she felt no pull toward him, only a quiet awareness of how far she had traveled from the girl he once knew. A woman from her old pack asked gently if she had settled nearby or if she was just visiting, and Emily answered honestly that she lived a few hours away now, far enough that the nights felt different and the stars looked unfamiliar at first. That answer alone sparked interest, because distance implied change, and change invited speculation. Ryan drifted closer, as if drawn by that curiosity, and laughed about something trivial before adding, lightly, that Emily had always liked to wander, always chasing ideas that never quite led anywhere. The words were casual, almost friendly, but Emily felt the subtle weight behind them, the assumption that her story had stalled while his had progressed. She smiled, again, unbothered, and said that wandering had taught her exactly where she belonged. The room shifted, just a little, because confidence spoken softly carried its own gravity. Someone mentioned an upcoming regional council visit, the kind that brought important names and tight security, and the conversation turned speculative, full of guesses and excitement. Emily listened without comment, her pulse steady, her posture relaxed. She checked the time on her phone, noting how close it was to the hour she had been waiting for, and slipped it back into her purse without explanation. Ryan, catching the movement, raised an eyebrow and asked if she had somewhere important to be, his tone playful but probing. Emily met his eyes and answered simply that she was expected, and that was enough. The answer did not satisfy him, and she could see the question forming again, sharper this time. But before he could speak, the atmosphere in the hall subtly changed. It was not dramatic, not loud, just a collective pause, the way conversations naturally slowed when something significant approached. Emily felt it first, a familiar calm settling over her shoulders, like standing in the quiet center of a wide field. She turned slightly toward the entrance, not in anticipation, but in recognition, as if responding to a signal no one else could hear. Ryan followed her gaze, confused, scanning the doorway and finding nothing yet, and for the first time that evening, his certainty wavered. Emily remained still, breathing evenly, her hand brushing the bracelet at her wrist again, grounding herself in the present moment. Whatever assumptions had been made about her life, whatever conclusions had been drawn from her silence, she knew the truth did not need defending. It was already on its way. Emily stayed near the same spot as the hall filled again with low conversation, but inside her, the world narrowed to something quieter and more focused. She could feel the past pressing close, not as pain, but as memory, the kind that surfaced when old places tried to claim old versions of her. She remembered the night Ryan had ended things years ago, standing outside a small diner with flickering lights, telling her he needed someone who could keep up, someone whose future looked clearer than hers. At the time, she had believed him. She had gone home, packed what little she owned into the trunk of a used sedan, and driven west until the road felt unfamiliar and the expectations finally fell away. That was where her life had shifted, not suddenly, but steadily, mile by mile, day by day. She had taken work no one wanted, learned patience the hard way, and discovered that being underestimated gave her space to grow without interruption. The hall buzzed again as someone laughed too loudly, and Emily blinked, returning fully to the present. Ryan was still nearby, talking with easy charm, but now his confidence felt thinner, stretched by curiosity he could not satisfy. He asked her again, lightly, what she had meant by being expected, and she answered with the same calm simplicity, that she had commitments, responsibilities that mattered. The words were ordinary, but the way she said them was not defensive or proud, just certain, and that certainty unsettled him more than any argument could have. He joked that she always had been mysterious, always holding something back, and Emily almost smiled at that, because for the first time, it was true by choice, not by fear. Around them, people speculated openly about the rumored visitor, someone important enough to draw attention from beyond their region, someone whose presence alone shifted priorities and schedules. Emily felt the pull again, gentle and unmistakable, like a hand at the small of her back guiding her forward without urgency. She adjusted her posture, grounding herself, aware of the subtle energy that brushed past her, familiar and reassuring. Ryan noticed the change, the way she seemed more centered, more anchored, and for a brief moment, he studied her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. He asked if she was happy, the question slipping out before he could soften it, and Emily answered honestly that she was, happier than she had ever imagined she could be. There was no boast in her voice, no need to compare, only truth. The answer left him quiet, and the silence between them stretched, filled with things neither of them said. Emily looked past him toward the entrance again, her attention drawn not by noise but by presence, and she felt a sense of rightness settle over her, like arriving home after a long journey. Whatever came next would not be a performance or a confrontation. It would simply be reality catching up to perception. She took a slow breath, steady and unhurried, knowing that the story people believed about her was about to change, not because she demanded it, but because it was time. The moment stretched, delicate and precise, as if the evening itself were holding its breath. Emily felt eyes drifting toward her more often now, not openly, but with that subtle reassessment that happened when a familiar story stopped fitting. Someone nearby commented on how calm she seemed, how unchanged, and Emily accepted the observation without correcting it, because what had changed was not visible on the surface. She shifted her weight slightly, the bracelet at her wrist catching the light for a brief second, and she lowered her hand again, aware that small details often spoke louder than explanations. Ryan glanced at the bracelet, then at her hand again, his brow creasing as if something about it refused to make sense. He asked, half joking, if she had finally learned to enjoy the attention she used to avoid, and Emily answered that she had learned which attention mattered. The reply was simple, but it landed with quiet finality. Across the hall, a few organizers moved with purpose, checking their phones, straightening banners, adjusting the placement of chairs near the front, motions that suggested preparation rather than coincidence. The murmurs grew more focused, speculation narrowing into expectation. Emily felt the familiar steadiness settle deeper into her bones, the same feeling she had on the morning she signed papers that changed her life, the same calm certainty she felt when she stood beside someone whose presence made the world feel ordered. She did not need to look for him to know how close he was. Ryan followed her gaze again, searching for whatever she seemed to sense, and this time his smile faltered completely. He asked, more carefully now, if she had come alone, and Emily paused just long enough to be honest without revealing more than necessary. She said she rarely arrived anywhere truly alone. The words were not cryptic, but they carried a weight that shifted the balance between them. He laughed softly, trying to recover the tone they used to share, and said she always did like to speak in riddles, but there was an edge to his curiosity now, sharpened by the feeling that he was standing on the wrong side of something important. Emily did not respond, not because she was withholding, but because there was nothing left to explain. A ripple of awareness moved through the room, subtle but unmistakable, as conversation slowed and heads turned toward the entrance. The doors had not opened yet, but the change was real, like the pressure shift before a storm that never broke violently, only rearranged the sky. Emily straightened, her expression soft but resolute, and she took a step forward, not away from Ryan, but beyond him, toward the space where truth waited. He watched her move, confusion giving way to dawning realization, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of where he stood in relation to her. She felt no triumph in that, only clarity. This was not about proving him wrong or reclaiming something lost. It was about standing fully in a life she had chosen, one built quietly, patiently, without witnesses. As the first figure appeared near the doorway, drawing a hush from the crowd, Emily inhaled slowly, grounding herself in the present moment. Whatever assumptions lingered, whatever questions remained unasked, they were about to resolve themselves. She did not rush, did not look back, did not need reassurance. She knew who she was, and she knew who she was, and that knowledge anchored her as the evening prepared to reveal what had been hidden in plain sight. The hush settled fully now, not forced but instinctive, the kind that spread when people sensed importance without being told. Emily slowed her steps and stopped a few feet from the open space forming near the entrance, her presence drawing attention without demanding it. She felt Ryan behind her, close enough to sense his uncertainty, and she knew he was watching her with a new calculation, one that no longer fit the easy categories he once relied on. Someone near the front whispered a name she did not repeat, a title spoken with reverence rather than gossip, and the sound moved through the room like a current. Emily felt it too, that familiar pull aligning with the quiet certainty she carried, and she allowed herself a small breath, steady and grounding. The first members of the arriving party stepped inside, composed, deliberate, dressed with understated authority, and conversation ceased entirely. Emily did not look surprised, because none of this was unexpected. She had known the timing, the place, the careful discretion that accompanied moments like this. Ryan shifted uncomfortably and murmured something about not realizing anyone of consequence was scheduled to attend, his voice low, almost defensive, as if the evening were slipping out of his control. Emily did not respond. She did not need to. Her attention remained forward, her posture relaxed, her expression open and unguarded. As more figures entered, the atmosphere thickened with respect, not fear, and people straightened instinctively, adjusting clothing, lowering voices, reorienting themselves toward what mattered most. Emily noticed how easily the room organized itself around that presence, how naturally the center shifted. Someone nearby leaned toward her and asked in a hushed tone if she knew what was happening, and Emily answered softly that it was a visit long planned, nothing more, nothing less. The words were true and understated, and they carried a calm that contrasted sharply with the rising tension around them. Ryan finally stepped closer, his voice tight with forced humor, asking if she had known about this in advance, if this was what she had meant earlier. Emily turned to him then, meeting his eyes fully, and she saw the moment when recognition tried to take shape and failed, blocked by years of assumption. She told him that knowing and understanding were not the same thing, and that some truths only made sense when you were ready to see them. The answer left him silent. A subtle movement at the doorway drew everyone's focus, and Emily felt the connection strengthen, like a thread pulled gently but firmly into place. She did not rush forward, did not call out, did not seek attention. She simply stood where she was, present and composed, trusting what had been built between patience and time. Around her, people watched, curiosity edging toward awe, as the final figure paused just inside the hall, surveying the room with a calm that commanded space without effort. Emily felt a warmth settle at her back, familiar and reassuring, and she knew that the next moments would not be about spectacle, but about alignment. Ryan swallowed hard, his gaze flicking between Emily and the entrance, and for the first time, he looked unsure of his own place in the story unfolding. Emily felt no need to correct him, no urge to explain or justify. The life she lived did not require his approval. It stood on its own, ready to be seen, as the evening moved inexorably toward the truth waiting just beyond the threshold. The final figure stepped fully into the hall, and the shift was immediate and unmistakable, not loud, not dramatic, but complete, like gravity reasserting itself after a moment of suspension. Conversations did not stop because they were told to, but because no one felt the need to speak. Emily felt him before she saw him clearly, the steady presence that had anchored her through distance and discretion, through choices made quietly and kept private for a reason. He moved with unhurried confidence, dressed simply, without excess, the kind of authority that did not require display. People straightened as he passed, some offering respectful nods, others lowering their gaze instinctively, recognizing power even if they did not yet name it. Emily remained where she was, her posture relaxed, her expression softening in a way that only those who knew her well would notice. Ryan froze beside her, the easy rhythm of his evening breaking apart as recognition dawned too late. He whispered something under his breath, a question that did not fully form, his eyes fixed on the man approaching with dawning disbelief. The Alpha King did not scan the room for approval or reaction. His attention was singular, focused, and when his gaze found Emily, the distance between them seemed to close without either of them moving. She felt the familiar warmth settle at her side, not possessive, not overwhelming, just present, the same steady assurance she had come to rely on. He crossed the remaining space with calm purpose, stopping in front of her as if there had never been any doubt about where he belonged. The room watched, silent, waiting, as he inclined his head slightly, not to the crowd, but to her. Emily met his eyes, and the exchange between them was quiet and complete, a shared understanding built over time rather than spectacle. He spoke her name, clear and certain, and the sound of it carried weight, enough to make several people inhale sharply. Ryan took an involuntary step back, his mind scrambling to reconcile the man before him with the assumptions he had clung to. Someone near the front murmured the title aloud, the words rippling through the hall with stunned reverence, and the truth settled heavily, inescapably. Emily felt no urge to explain, no desire to soften the impact. She simply reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve, a small, intimate gesture that confirmed what words did not need to. The Alpha King turned then, addressing the room with measured clarity, acknowledging the gathering, the community, the unexpected timing of his arrival, his tone respectful and composed. He did not boast or threaten. He did not need to. His presence alone redefined the space. He returned his attention to Emily, offering his arm, a silent invitation rather than a command, and she accepted without hesitation. The movement was natural, practiced, the result of a partnership forged away from curious eyes. Ryan stared, stunned, the question he had asked earlier echoing back at him with new meaning. And for the first time, he understood the depth of his mistake. Emily felt no satisfaction in his realization, only a calm finality. This was not a revelation staged for effect. It was simply the truth arriving on schedule. As the Alpha King guided her forward, the crowd parted instinctively, making room not just for power, but for the quiet certainty of a woman who had never needed their approval. Emily walked beside him, grounded and assured, knowing that whatever came next would be faced together, openly now, with nothing left to hide. The room seemed to exhale all at once, a collective release as the truth settled into place and rearranged every assumption that had come before it. Emily felt the shift not as pressure but as relief, the quiet kind that followed honesty finally spoken aloud. The Alpha King remained at her side, his presence steady, unintrusive, allowing the moment to belong to her as much as to him. People watched with new eyes now, recognizing the subtle signs they had overlooked, the confidence that did not ask permission, the calm that did not need validation. A few stepped forward instinctively, offering respectful greetings, careful words chosen with new awareness, and Emily acknowledged them with the same grace she always had, neither distant nor deferential. Ryan stood frozen several steps back, the realization hitting him in slow, undeniable waves. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then stopped, understanding finally that whatever he might say no longer mattered. The Alpha King addressed the gathering again, clarifying the purpose of his visit with composed transparency, expressing appreciation for the community without embellishment, his words measured and sincere. He spoke of partnership and responsibility, of honoring connections rather than exploiting them, and as he spoke, Emily felt the alignment between his values and her own settle deeper, affirmed in front of witnesses who had once doubted her worth. Someone asked softly how long they had been married, the question respectful now, stripped of mockery, and the Alpha King answered plainly, giving a time frame that made several people visibly startled. Emily smiled faintly, not because of their surprise, but because the timeline told a story of quiet commitment rather than spectacle. Ryan finally found his voice, his tone subdued, almost hesitant, and asked if she had been happy all this time. Emily turned to him then, not unkindly, and answered with the same honesty she had offered earlier, that happiness had grown slowly, built on trust and shared purpose, and that it had been real. The words closed a chapter without bitterness. The Alpha King placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, a supportive gesture that spoke of familiarity rather than display, and Emily leaned into it naturally, unself-conscious. The crowd responded not with applause, but with something more meaningful, a quiet acceptance, an acknowledgement of balance restored. Organizers resumed their roles, conversations restarted at a lower, more thoughtful volume, and the evening took on a different tone, no longer speculative but grounded. Emily felt the eyes on her change, curiosity giving way to respect, and she understood that while opinions might take time to fully shift, the foundation had been laid. She did not linger on Ryan or the past they shared. That chapter had already served its purpose. Instead, she focused on the present, on the partnership beside her, on the life they had built without asking permission. As they moved together through the hall, greeted with nods and quiet smiles, Emily felt a sense of wholeness she had earned through patience and resilience. This was not a victory over anyone else. It was a confirmation of her own path, chosen freely and walked with integrity. The Alpha King glanced at her, his expression warm, and she returned the look, secure in the knowledge that the truth, once revealed, did not need defending. It simply existed, solid and undeniable, ready to carry them forward into whatever came next. As the evening progressed, the initial shock gave way to a quieter, deeper reckoning, one that unfolded in subtle shifts rather than dramatic gestures. Emily felt it in the way people approached her now, with measured respect instead of curiosity, in the careful pauses before questions, in the softened expressions that acknowledged her place without demanding explanation. The Alpha King remained close, not hovering, not guarding, simply present, a constant that anchored the room as much as it anchored her. He spoke with community leaders in low, composed tones, discussing practical matters, future coordination, shared responsibilities, and Emily listened with the ease of someone long accustomed to these conversations. This was not a performance she stepped into tonight. It was a role she had already earned. Ryan lingered at the periphery, watching the dynamics shift beyond his control, the realization settling that the narrative he once held no longer applied. When he finally approached, his posture was different, less certain, and his voice carried a restraint she had never heard from him before. He offered an apology, simple and unembellished, not for leaving, but for assuming he had understood her limits. Emily received it without ceremony, acknowledging the effort without reopening the past. She told him that people often mistook quiet for absence, and that growth did not always announce itself. The exchange was brief, respectful, and complete. The Alpha King observed without interruption, his trust in her evident in his silence. Nearby, someone remarked softly on how well suited they seemed, not in contrast, but in balance, and Emily felt a gentle warmth at the truth of it. She had not been chosen as an accessory to power, but as a partner who understood its weight. As the hall settled into a new rhythm, Emily noticed how easily her presence now belonged at the center of things, not because she demanded attention, but because she no longer avoided it. She engaged thoughtfully, offering insight when asked, listening when others spoke, her voice calm and assured. The Alpha King deferred to her on matters of local knowledge, a subtle acknowledgement that did not go unnoticed, and several people exchanged glances, recalibrating their understanding of influence. Emily felt no urge to correct them. Understanding would come in time. The evening wore on, measured in conversations rather than minutes, and the earlier tension dissolved into something steadier, more honest. Emily caught her reflection briefly in a darkened window, the familiar face looking back at her, unchanged and yet profoundly different, and she smiled at the woman she had become. This moment was not a culmination, but a continuation, a natural extension of choices made with intention. When the Alpha King returned to her side, offering a quiet comment that made her smile, she realized how seamlessly their lives had intertwined, how little they needed to explain to each other. Together, they moved through the hall with unforced ease, acknowledging farewells, accepting gratitude, setting expectations with clarity. Emily felt a sense of closure settle gently, not final, but sufficient. The assumptions that once defined her had been replaced by truth, not through confrontation, but through presence. As they prepared to leave, the room seemed to hold on to them for a moment longer, the significance of the evening lingering in the air. Emily took one last look around, not with nostalgia, but with appreciation, and stepped forward beside her partner, confident that whatever lay ahead would be faced openly, grounded in respect, and guided by the quiet strength she had always carried. The night air outside the hall felt cooler and clearer, the kind that reset the senses after something meaningful had settled into place. Emily stepped out beside the Alpha King, their pace unhurried, the world around them quieter now that the moment had passed. The lights behind them glowed softly through the windows, but their significance faded as the distance grew, replaced by the steady rhythm of footsteps and the calm that followed truth finally acknowledged. Emily breathed in deeply, grounding herself, feeling the familiar reassurance of his presence at her side, not as a shield, but as a companion who walked with her rather than ahead of her. He asked softly if she was all right, his tone attentive without worry, and she smiled, answering that she felt lighter than she had in a long time. The answer surprised her with its simplicity, because it was true. The weight of being misunderstood had slipped away, not dramatically, but completely. They paused near the car, the quiet hum of the night wrapping around them, and Emily looked back once, not at the people, but at the place where her past and present had briefly overlapped. There was no regret in her gaze, only acknowledgement. She had outgrown the need to be seen by those who could not recognize her value before. The Alpha King rested a hand gently over hers, grounding and familiar, and she squeezed his fingers once, a silent exchange that carried everything words did not need to. He told her that he was proud of her, not for how the evening had unfolded, but for the life she had built quietly, with intention, and Emily felt that affirmation settle deep. more meaningful than any public recognition. As they drove away, the road stretched ahead in steady lines, measured in miles rather than moments, and Emily watched the town recede into the distance, smaller than it had ever seemed. She thought of the girl she once was, standing uncertainly at the edge of expectations, and felt a quiet gratitude for every step that had carried her forward. This ending was not a conclusion, but a confirmation, a reminder that the strongest truths did not announce themselves loudly. They revealed themselves through consistency, through patience, through choosing the right path, even when no one was watching. The Alpha King spoke about the days ahead, about responsibilities waiting, about shared plans and practical details, and Emily listened with ease, adding her thoughts naturally, already shaping what came next together. There was no need to look back anymore. The past had been acknowledged, the present firmly claimed, and the future stretched wide and open, defined not by mockery or doubt, but by mutual respect and purpose. Emily leaned back, watching the stars pass overhead, feeling settled in a way she once believed was reserved for others. She had not been chosen at the last moment, rescued, or proven worthy by spectacle. She had been seen, valued, and partnered by someone who understood her quiet strength from the beginning. As the road carried them onward, Emily closed her eyes briefly, a small smile lingering, secure in the knowledge that her story was no longer shaped by what others assumed, but by the life she continued to build, one steady mile at a time.